7, Delegate Love, Sarah Demick Langenkamp. Relax and feel free to bring up your panel, Delegate.
Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, members of the best committee ever. I am Sarah Love, and it is my privilege to sit before you and present HB 337, the Sarah Demick Langenkamp Memorial Act. I'm joined by Sarah's husband, Dan, with whom I have been working to craft this bill. And I just want to say on the record, thank you, Dan, for fighting and continuing to fight to make sure that other families don't go through what you went through. In August of 2022, Sarah was riding her bike on River Road in my district and the chair's district in a bike lane. She was coming home from her children's elementary school. A truck turned to go into a parking lot and crossed the bike lane, hitting Sarah and killing her. On top of losing a wife, a mother, and an amazing diplomat, the already devastated family had to sit and watch as the driver of that truck received a $2,000 fine and 150 hours of community service. HB 337 would change the penalty for that to up to 2 months in jail and up to a $2,000 fine. HB 337 will send a message to other motorists that we care about cyclists like Sarah, and that when we say Vision Zero, we mean it. Thank you, and I urge a favorable report for HB 337.
Thank you, Delegate Love. Thank you, Chairman Corman, and Vice Chair Boyce. Sarah was killed 18 months ago, and my family is still recovering. Those who know grief know that you are always recovering. This was like an explosion in the middle of our house, and it's been difficult. We're struggling with half of our income, grief and trauma. I have a new childcare burden, all because a careless driver didn't realize that a bike lane was something that you need to take care about. As Delegate Love said, this bill says bike lanes matter. It tells society that these are protected spaces. This is a principle that we have in the law in Maryland. We are careful around school buses and we stop. And there are penalties for running a school bus stop signal. Around school zones, we have protected spaces, and we have protected spaces around crosswalks, because we say there should be people other than cars should be able to use our streets. So this bill is simply extending the same penalty that you get for hitting somebody in a crosswalk to bike lanes in the state. And it increases the penalty to $2,000 also, which the crosswalk law does not have. It's a reasonable thing for, I think we can agree, a space that is important in our society, because we're trying to encourage people to use different types of transportation. Just want to say something else about equity. This is important for equity in Maryland as well, because if you're a Black American, for example, you're more than 3.5 times more likely to get killed on a bike. It's important for all Americans because we're at 40-year highs of pedestrian deaths and near 30-year highs of bicyclist deaths in America, because drivers are more distracted than ever, and because drivers are driving bigger and heavier and more dangerous cars than ever with bigger blind spots. So we need to take action, and this is one action. So I urge you to support the bill. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Cohen. Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, And Delegate Stein, it's nice to see you again. I've been before this committee many, many times, primarily in the years 2012 to 2016. And at that point, I gave up. I was working on older driver safety issues, and that never got solved. But I might be back. I'm here for the Sarah Langenkamp bill because my kid died in a bike lane also. He was killed, not immediately, but virtually killed, when an older driver crossed in front of him on a Saturday morning. He was in the bike lane. She knew he was there. And she looked for him ineffectively, as many older drivers tend to do. She crossed in front of him. He hit her car. He ended up on her driveway. And she sat on a wall and did not do anything about this crash. So here's my guy. He was a sophomore in 2011 at Johns Hopkins. And I'm sure there are people in this room that remember this crash, and me. So I just want to say that the penalty for the older driver that did this was a fine for the 3-foot bike law, a new law. And that was like 100 or something. And then the negligent driving without injury, because the officer did not check the correct box. So a couple $100. That was it. But there was a top-notch medical advisory board at MVA that could have evaluated the functionality of this woman behind the wheel, but no referral from the police. So now we go to bike lanes. So it is so important that House Bill 337 get passed to make a meaningful change to the law for Sarah Langenkamp. And I would say for Nathan Krasnopoler also. It is so important that drivers know that bike lanes exist. They don't notice them. They don't honor them. They don't realize they're a lane of travel. So it is with urging that this committee give it a favorable report, because drivers need to know that those lives of people using those bike lanes, and by the way, standing on West University at the scene of the crash, just yesterday, we had a scooter go by and a non-motorcycle thing go by, and we had several bikes using that bike lane across the street from Hopkins. All of those lives are important. And I urge you to give a favorable report to increasing the penalties and showing motorists that that lane contains the lives of real people, and they owe them a duty of care. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and committee members. My name is Nigel Samaru. I'm a member of the Maryland Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, board member of Bike Maryland, and chair of the Advocacy Committee of the Baltimore Bicycling Club. I've previously appeared before this committee as the face of the victim to testify in support of the vulnerable road user legislation. I'm here today to testify before you in support of HB 337, the Sarah Debbing Langenkamp Memorial Act. As a victim who twice has survived crashes, one in 2017, which some of you on this committee are aware of, and in 2020 here in Anne Arundel County, when 6 friends and I were hit by a driver, resulting in my dear friend being killed instantly. In 2022, 11 bicyclists were killed, and in 2023, that number has increased to 15. In 2023, 30% of Maryland roadway deaths were vulnerable road users, and those numbers aren't improving. Bike lanes represent, for bicyclists who are vulnerable road users, a protected space where we should be able to ride our bikes with some degree of safety. When a driver does not exercise caution when bicyclists are using a bike lane, the result can be deadly, as we have seen in the case of Sarah Langenkamp, a wife and mother of 2 sons, and a U.S. diplomat, and Nathan Krasnopoler, a 20-year-old student at Johns Hopkins. Penalties aren't the only answer, nor are they on their own sufficient, but they can serve as deterrents and a motivator for drivers to exercise greater caution and vigilance. HB 337 seeks to accomplish that by increasing penalties for those drivers that fail to exercise due caution or cause a crash that injures or even kills a person on a bicycle that was legally operating in what should have been a protected space. Bike lanes are meant to be a place on the roads where we as bicyclists, as people, should expect a greater level of vigilance and caution on the part of drivers. HB 337 is a step in the right direction, and I urge a favorable vote in committee and on the floor. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, members of the committee. My name is Kyle O'Grady. I appear in support of this bill on behalf of State's Attorney John McCarthy and on behalf of the Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office, where I serve as a prosecutor in the Felony Trial Division and am the acting supervisor of the Traffic Fatality Unit. Section 21-1209 of the Transportation Article exists to protect operators of bicycles by establishing the responsibilities of drivers of motor vehicles. Now, these responsibilities are common sense. It's exercise due care to avoid striking cyclists, pass at a safe distance, don't throw things at them, and for today's purposes, most significantly, yield the right of way to a person lawfully riding a bicycle in a designated bike lane or on the shoulder. Now, at present, any violation of one of these provisions is a payable citation, even if it contributes to an accident and even if that accident causes a death. This bill does not change the responsibilities of either bicyclists or drivers of motor vehicles. Their respective obligations to follow the rules of the road remain the same, unchanged. What this bill does is add an incarcerable penalty for a violation of subsection D that contributes to an accident. These are circumstances in which the cyclist is not in a travel lane sharing space with a car, but rather in a designated bike lane or on the shoulder. It's using a separate portion of the roadway, a place where they should have the greatest level of protection under the law. This bill is consistent with our state's pattern of expanding protections to other vulnerable users of the roadway, as we've done with pedestrians, wheelchair users, play vehicles, and so on. And the proposed penalty here is identical to the statutes that expanded those protections to those other individuals. Moreover, by adding this penalty provision, we provide judges more discretion to appropriately differentiate more serious cases. For instance, drivers who are subsequent offenders or cases in which death occurs. And lastly, a violation that contributes to an accident becomes a must appear citation, which extends the respect and recognition to an injured victim or to the next of kin of somebody who has died. It gives victims their day in court. For those reasons, on behalf of the State's Attorney's Office, I urge a favorable report on House Bill 337. Thank you.
Thank you all. Let me just say, Dan, I know you and Oliver Naxler are not just fighting here, but also in Congress for change. So thank you for all your advocacy and trying to turn something so awful into something positive. And Ms. Cohen, thank you as well for sharing your story and your experience. And we welcome you back to the advocacy role that it sounds like you were playing a few years ago as well. Are there any questions for these witnesses? Okay, I do not see any. So that concludes the bill hearing on HB 337. Colleagues, it's been a long week. We have a full day of bill hearings tomorrow after floor. And then